So we're going to begin our talk now. Um, I'm going to focus on 4 paths that we can use to come back to our true nature. But I would like to begin by asking you on chat, how would you define our true nature? What are the components of this true nature? And we can use the chat, maybe sharing some thoughts, insights, brainstorming some ideas on what is our true nature. Some would call it our Buddha nature. What are the components? Love. I agree completely. Self-awareness, living without fear, authenticity, creativity, love, compassion, love, curiosity, light, kindness, compassion, patience, generosity, feeling whole, our wholeness, stillness, caring for others, pure love, light, goodness, kindness, generosity of heart, kindness, compassion, coming home to love, childlike joy, wisdom, without ego, awareness, loving expression, lightheartedness, joy, play, center of awareness and will, truth, life and death, being, we, empathy, self compassion, curiosity, enjoying our moments, even mindedness, balance of sympathetic and parasympathetic, homeostasis, balance. I agree. Sanjay, thank you. Connected to all beings, remembering that I am loving energy, being one, unconditioned rest, pure potential, infinite connectedness. Beautiful. So we see a thread here. Um, it's very clear that we more or less agree into what it is that is our true nature. We might not always be able to be in contact or embodying our true nature. And now I'm curious to know what might be the obstacles to owning our true nature, to making it a way of living. What are those obstacles that you identify in your daily experience or in others? So, yes, absolutely. Fear, when we feel unsafe, attachment, anger, ego, economical stress for sure, childhood trauma, society's expectations, selfishness, habit, embarrassment, emotionality, trauma, forsaking my real safe, desire, worry, false beliefs, external pressure, inner critic, striving for something different, lack of courage, jealousy, craving, lack of self-worth, busyness. Thank you for naming busyness, because we do get to be, or we do get to stay in this distracted mode. That's going to be my first path. So all these are truth. I invite you to continue to read and chat all the multiple options that stands between us and our true nature, our true self. But the good news is that we are in the right place if we want to awaken to our true nature. And I'm not saying this talk only. I'm saying our practice. No, I think that's the greatest gift that we have. in our Buddhist training or in our contemplative training is that regardless of how far we've been from our true nature, there's a path waiting for us or holding us in the way back to our true nature. So I would like to begin by remembering that we always have this choice, and especially now that I know we're in a very critical moment as a nation, the US, but the entire world is having like a ripple effect of this very delicate and serious moment. We need to remember that when we can't rely on our leaders, we need to rely on each other, and we need to rely into our own good hearts. So that's what's making this remembrance exercise, this remembering our potential and our superpowers and our true nature more urgent than ever. And this is new territory, so we might need to hold hands to move forward. But the good news is that we have each other. And there is no other way to the other shore than with love, than with compassion, and with the power of community. So remembering our true nature, I completely agree with what's been shared on chat. And it's basically kind of reclaiming our essence, returning to our sanity, and remembering our wholeness, and actually connecting with the true power of life and our own true inner power. And then I was talking about the possibility of having choices. We need to remember that there's always a choice so that we can preserve that sense of agency. And our basic choice all the time is either to succumb, like get lost in despair and lack of faithfulness or hope, or we can also have the other side of the same coin, that is remembering our true nature and deciding to be more brave in the face of love, and having this clarity to ask ourselves, what is the next best step for me and for others? The question here would be, how would love have me respond to what's happening internally or externally? And as we search for meaning, we will begin to remember what is it that we are aiming for or we are hoping for individually and collectively. And I say this because suffering is not enough. Suffering really is the beginning of the story. And as Thich Nhat Hanh says, we need to cultivate joy and love, because suffering is not enough. Suffering is not enough. So I'm going to begin with our first invitation tonight. And this is inspired in Ram Dass, one of my most beloved teachers. And his invitation is to remember that we are loving awareness. So in order to reclaim our life from distractions, from busyness, from this monkey mind that goes from one place to another, we need to cut these endless distractions in our world and be able to come back to ourselves. So this is our first nature, and it's actually our divine right to be able to live our life as if it was worth living it, like staying in the moments, because there's nothing else than the moments, than the present moment. So we do need to have the courage to stay with those moments that are difficult when they are difficult. But the truth is only available in this present moment. So this not doing, this resting, this practicing in our breath is actually the first step to create those inner conditions that will allow us to feel at home or to recognize our true nature. So when we feel more kind, more calmed, more spacious, we can welcome everything, even those things that can be challenging, because there's more room, there's more spaciousness within us. We can think this as the analogy of the spoon of salt, that if we pour a spoon of salt in a small glass, it's going to be very, very salty. But the same spoon of salt in a lake is going to be diluted, and it's not going to be as salty. So we can think of the salt as the conditions, the external conditions, those that we might not be able to change. But we do have some room and spaciousness internally to be present to what is true or what is happening outside. So this is the first practice, the first invitation, our practice of self-awareness, self-inquiry. And because our aim is to be liberated and have an authentic life, we also think of this practice as a radical act of love to wake up to our sanity. And we only have this life. So the possibility to kind of inhabiting our life is our right, as I was saying. So to be able to touch life, to be able to touch the present moment, and to be able to stay fully present for ourselves and for those that we love, that is magic. That is a miracle. So this will also allow us to remember that we have infinite possibility to transform, to be agents of change. Because once we remember our own true nature, we know that what we do in the world, the way that we behave in the world matters. So this leads me to our second path to remembering our own true nature, or our actual benevolent, compassionate nature. That is to understand compassion as a healing force. So sometimes we might forget that we do have a power to make a difference in this world. We might feel that we're small. We might feel that our suffering is enough, that we can't take any more suffering. But actually, helping others will reduce our suffering and will increase our well-being and our ability to feel joyful and connected. So let's begin by what is compassion, and where does that concept comes from, that understanding comes from. And it comes from what we understand as shared common humanity. As human beings, we are all looking for one same thing. Of course, that is to be happy and to be free from suffering. So when we're looking for paths toward wholeness or healing or remembering our true nature, we do need to consider compassion as a path, because that is where most liberation is available. So I would like to share a definition I recently heard of healing that I find is very interrelated with compassion. This is from a conversation between Ram Dass and Stephen Levine. And Stephen said that healing is simply the art of touching with love what you've so often touched with confusion, fear, and hatred. So it's actually making some room for our pain and bringing the love that is available in our hearts and minds. And that is precisely what compassion is. Compassion is being able to notice the suffering internally or externally, being moved by it, developing the intention for that suffering to be liberated or alleviated at least or prevented, and then moving towards doing something about it. Sometimes it is listening, sometimes it is our presence, sometimes it is our care, and that in itself can be very powerful and healing. So we all have that capacity. We have that capacity inwardly. That's going to be our third path. But we have that capacity for others. And there's so much liberation in community when we share with each other. So it seems that our true nature is not only loving in its presence, but it's also loving in its actions. We are able to be there for each other. And that's really the basis of supporting each other and coming together as humanity. And to remember that we belong, we need to remember that we need each other, we belong to each other. And that's why we take refuge in the Buddha, in the Sangha, and in the Dharma, in the teachings, because that's really our process of remembering that we belong, and that is our true nature, that we are. And this is something I recently as well learned from Tara Brach, beautiful Tara Brach, because she stated that when we take refuge in the Buddha, we're actually taking refuge in awareness, in truth. We are belonging to this pure, formless awareness when we remember our Buddha nature. And then when we take refuge in the Dharma, we take refuge in the truth, in what's actually the essence of what is happening moment to moment, in the moment to moment experience. And that is very liberating because it's the reality of what's happening. It's the path. And finally, when we take refuge in a community like this, a spiritual community, we remember that we are love, that we belong to love. So in being not only able to stay with our life and with each moment, we are also able to connect with others, because we will not be kind of absent in our mind in what's called like these limbic kidnap, because we're lost in our emotions or in the past or in the future, but we will be able to be there for ourselves and for others. So our compassionate nature is actually not only our nature, but it's also a superpower, because it reminds us that there's something that we can do in the face of difficulties and suffering. And it's a matter of time that we will need the love and the help from others. We might be in this moment able to support others. Others might be able to support me. And as time passes by, we will all be in the different positions of caring. We're all caregivers. So this is our second path, remembering the healing power of compassion. And now I'm going to share a little bit about self-compassion. So this is, of course, a key essence, not only because of the way that we've been conditioned in our culture, that we lack of models and examples to know how to be kind to ourselves. But if compassion does not include us, it is incomplete. It simply cannot be as pure or as deep if we don't have these inner resources as well. So I like to describe this as an art, as poetry, for example. We just did this practice of remembering our true nature and our capacity of being kind to ourselves. And it's profound because it has an effect in the mind, in the heart, and in the body every time that we offer ourselves this kindness, this friendliness, this mentorship that we can offer when we are suffering or when we are simply trying to get somewhere or accomplish a goal in our life. We do need to have that inner ally within us. So sometimes there's a war inside ourselves, and we might not even notice that there's a war. So the good news is that because of the nature of this loving awareness, it is forgiving in itself. So when we stop and feel our pain or stop and connect with our needs, we can bring that love, that grace, that ease, that forgiveness to the most abandoned relationship that we all might have. And just by bringing this kindness inwardly, the healing begins to take place, maybe as you just experienced. Because this sacred inner loving awareness, what it does is that because it's so benevolent, it acts as a mirror that dissolves, that clears everything. So the healing is in the awareness. The healing is not in doing something different or in adding more complex layers to the process. Is kind of touching what's true, holding the space for whatever is happening inwardly, and then offering ourselves the same care, the same love than we would to a good friend. So my favorite model to talk about self-compassion is Kristen Neff's definition, because she talks about three different moments or components that needs to be present when we talk about self-compassion. And she begins by talking about mindfulness versus over-identification or denial. So sometimes we do get lost in the story or in our beliefs. And with mindfulness, we can reclaim some space. We can touch what's difficult, but we can remember that we are not the difficulty. So that's the difference between holding a difficulty with some space or being kind of lost in it. And then she invites us to remember that suffering is part of the human experience. It's part of life, because sometimes we do tend to feel very isolated. We do tend to think that the grass is greener in the neighbor's field. And what's actually true is that we're all suffering one way or another. And that actually connects us, that actually allows us to understand that when I do my practice, I don't do it only for me. I do it for me and those that are also suffering. And then the third aspect is the most intuitive aspect, but the most actual, powerful aspect. That is this ability to offer ourselves kindness, that love, that support that we would offer someone that we need. Hmm? So, in that way, we have two aspects of self compassion. The one that is how we talk to ourselves. So, this is the self, the inner self that can be compassionate versus the inner self that can be critical. But there's a behavioral component. So it's not enough to reduce the violence in the language, the inner language. We do need to protect ourselves. We do need to turn this kindness into action. And sometimes we are very familiar with the tender aspect of self compassion, the one that is more caring, more nurturing, more soothing. But there's actually another aspect of compassion in general, but specifically of self compassion, that is the fierce aspect of self compassion that protects us, that actually is taking care of our limits and encouraging us to move to those places or conditions that will actually be aligned with our needs and values. So that's what I can share about self compassion and the different pathways to activate it. We usually combine a soothing tone of voice with some touch and some kind gaze visualization. But the idea is to begin to activate our parasympathetic nervous system and deactivate the sympathetic nervous system in terms that we want to increase the sense of connection, safety, belonging, and love. And we can rely on others to do that for us, but it's not a very safe bet because they don't know what we need. We do know what we need. So that is why the invitation will always be to put hands on your chest or offer yourself a hug, because that's the paths for the brain to begin to feel safe. And then we combine that with the language and the tone, and then we have the entire activation for self-compassion. And then my last invitation this night is going to be a brief invitation, but powerful invitation that is a radical act of self-compassion, actually, and is checking in with ourselves and our value systems to see if we are living fully aligned with our true nature. And our true nature is actually remembering that there is like a source of happiness that is sustainable in our life. We call that eudaimonic happiness, and is sustainable in terms that is not lost in like sensory experiences, but it invites us to stop, practice self-appreciation, connect with our highest values, those values that we truly believe in, we truly identify with, and to begin having the courage to live our life in alignment with those values. So we offer ourselves some questions. They can be a bit destabilizing because we might find gaps where I am not living in alignment with my true callings or with my values or my purpose in life. But really holding the heart of the awareness of impermanence or the truth of impermanence that is again part of our nature, it simply shows us that we might be distracted. And distraction is not only suffering in itself, but it's also suffering in terms that it might take us away from our path, from the present moment, and from listening our calls, our true nature calls. So some of these questions would be, for example, in my heart of hearts, what is it that I truly, truly aspire towards? Or am I living in alignment with my heart, with my truth, with my gut feeling? Or maybe what is stopping me from being truly myself? And remembering that time is limited can be a huge gift because it allows us to refocus and remember what's meaningful. What do we want to do with our precious time? And it's never too late to realign. It's never too late to flourish. Then maybe the ultimate question that will allow us all to connect before we go into our Q&A section, and I know there's a lot of comments on chat, is since we're here to at least do no harm, but hopefully to support others, to alleviate the suffering and bring meaning to others. Another question that can be of service is, how can I help? How can I be of service in this world? And awakening in these four paths of loving awareness, compassion, self-compassion, and purpose will not only bring us back to our true nature, but will allow us to connect with the magic of life. We are supported by life to do this, and we need to do this. We owe these to ourselves and to others that are watching and learning from us. So the invitation as a closing would be to live as if nothing is a miracle or as if everything is a miracle. And if we pause and stop and connect with these universal truths and timeless truths, we might begin to notice that everything is a miracle. So there's no time to lose in our search. And I want to open now the space for some comments, questions. You can use the chat. I'll try to go back to the comments and try to reply what's there. But if anyone would like to verbally share a question or a comment, please feel free to raise your digital hand, and Kathleen will call on you and will invite you to unmute. And in that way, we can hear more voices. I want to hear more voices. Ivana, please go ahead.
I was very looking forward to join this day because it's special that I know you're from Colombia and I'm from Uruguay. So it's always nice to have, I don't know, there's something about that. And I really thank you for your beautiful insights. I felt very, very connected with your words, your invitation. And yes, it's a moment of a lot of upheaval for our vulnerable communities, and some of us as immigrants are in a more privileged position. Some others are not so privileged. So I think for me, as much as I need so much compassion for myself in these times of instability, I worked many years serving the Latinx community and I lost my job overnight. What's calling my heart is that every day I am committed to help someone that I know really needs it, especially these days, because the stress is real for a lot of people, and not only obviously our Latinx community, but that's where I feel I can be of hopefully some service, with a space to breathe, to listen, to hug, to invite. There's people next door to me that are suffering, and it's very painful. And love is very, very important. And I know it's hard for a lot of us because I feel the frustration too. But yeah. I don't know if that made any sense, but I just wanted to share it.
It did make perfect sense. Thank you so much, Ivana, for sharing and for what you're doing in the world, and for taking good care of your heart and mind. I always go back to this beautiful teaching I received early on in my path that stated that no one wins if we are not okay. Like, the world needs us to have the integrity of a kind, open heart, because that is more healing than a heart that is shut. So I don't know if that's of any service, but right now it's more urgent than ever to take good care of your heart. We need your good heart. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thea, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say how much I appreciate the people here, the chat and the teachings is wonderful, Maria. Anyway, it's just good to be with you all. I live in a senior complex, and there's a community here, and I used to I ran a tenants association, and as people still come to me sometimes in that regard, and what would often happen is that people would come to me with an argument, a complaint about their neighbor, and then on top of that, a complaint that the manager didn't help them somehow resolve it, or actually a lot of them didn't want to resolve it. They kind of wanted to win. Anyway, I used to say, I can't take sides, and the manager can't take sides, and so please don't be mad. You know? I, and I would listen to each one of them. But it's somehow it's happening again now in a really big way with usually it's two people, both of whom I have a relationship with and like, and that's the case now. But how do you, I mean, how do you stop that process from going on? I was talking to first of my neighbor friends that even sees it the same way I do, that, it's not that one person's right and the other one's wrong. They both have, their complaints, their issues, their fears, or whatever it is, and they both, uh, well, in this case, it's really fears. Both of them are afraid, and they both, um, and they both have their really delightful sides if you know them. And
Mm.
people don't see that. They want one person to be good and the other person to be bad.
Mm.
Thea, would you repeat your question for Maria then? I heard that question.
How do you be with that in a way that helps people to drop their strong positioning and antipathy for each other, and try to um, help them to see that they're both people with pain and also with uh, good things to share and to
Thank you, Thea.
yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. It's a very important question, and we have that challenge when we are training our hearts in compassion. Especially, you're in the place of being an intermediary between two people that are in conflict. And I would recommend the nonviolent communication approach, in which they both have an opportunity to make an observation, touch upon how they're feeling, what they are needing, and asking each other. So, this is a very simplified version of a beautiful model that I invite you to explore. Um, and then there's a very core aspect of offering compassion for someone that is difficult. And we call that approach rehumanizing them. So, regardless of how angry I am or how in disagreement I am with their actions, the truth is that in a core basis, we can relate to each other because we both just want to be loved, happy, free from suffering. And whatever the other person is doing, it's doing it out of those same core motivations. So the practice, you'll find it under compassion for difficult people in your life, something around those lines. And that can be helpful in terms that we want to soften kind of the inner vision of the other person, so that through practice, my behavior can change. See, so it's like I sit in my mind and heart. I train this thing that is difficult, and then I might be able to be more prepared there. But I see you're in a place of wanting to mitigate a conflict that is probably escalating,
Yeah.
and that in itself is very hard, because to cultivate compassion, it needs to be an intrinsic motivation to do that.
Yeah.
But I honor your good heart,
Yeah.
an intention to help your neighbors. So I'm aware of time. I think we can take one more hand quickly, and then we will finish. Thank you, Thea. So Nora, please go ahead.
Yeah, I never believed in evil. I thought everyone's core was pure. But recent events, and especially this morning, he asking this angel bishop to apologize to the rest of us, it really was the last thing for me. Like I said, there is evil, there is a devil, and irreplaceable. You talk about rehumanizing. I don't think he can be rehumanized.
Nor do you have a question?
Yeah, my question is, how do you deal with that inside of yourself, myself? How do I come to calm myself down and see all this suffering going around me, and the head of our country doesn't give a damn?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah. Thank you so much for
Thank
naming
you.
that. And you're giving voice to like a collective voice. So I want to first honor that, honor your voice that speaks for millions. And what comes to mind is a teaching from Thich Nhat Hanh that states that when our house is in fire, we do not go after the person that started the fire. We need to stay at home and put down the flames, put down the fire first. We need to take care of the first victim, that is myself. So as I was telling Ivana, that my responsibility is going to be to take care of my heart, not shutting down completely, of doing the good that I can around me, of doing these, we call these compassionate activism, in a way that we don't want to move into burnout or harming more, creating more harm through that inner violence. And then there are moments where we need to know that it's not even safe to practice compassion for a target that is so threatening. So, in order for compassion to arise, you need to feel safe. And when you don't feel safe yet, we might never feel safe. But then the prescription in compassion world is to work on self-compassion, like this, and compassion for those that you can help, and to process together. So I would refrain from isolation. I would refrain from kind of feeding the kind of resentment or anger, but maybe taking that that anger is sacred anger, and then putting all that energy not into waste, because it will harm us and it's very costly, but putting it into some place where it can be of service, some place where it can bring some ease, some relief, some hope, some alleviation of suffering. So we can, that's how I started my talk. When we can't rely on our leaders, we need to rely on each other and on our own good hearts. So if you have a neighbor that is afraid, a friend that is struggling, someone that is having this same really visceral difficulty and very human reaction to what we are seeing, is okay. I won't go there. I won't force myself to have compassion for this very difficult person, very threatening person. I'm going to go where my heart is able to go, so that it doesn't shut down completely. So I don't know if that's helpful, because I know that that's not an answer. There's a lot of pain in your words, but I hope that this offering can be of some service to you. Thank you. And I want to finish our practice with a close dedication. Thank you so much for your time, for your listening, and for your generosity in sharing. May we dedicate the merits of our time together and our practice to water the seeds of love and compassion in the hearts and mind of humanity.